We are a nation adrift. We lack neither wind nor sail. We have no shortage of captains or gear. Yet our mighty ship flounders in a sea of partisanship, corruption, and selfishness. Our discourse is coarse, young people are failing to form relationships, and our brightest seek individual glory at the expense of the Commonwealth. Our institutions are decaying, and the connective tissue of society frays nearly beyond repair. On the horizon, darkness and thunder. To the west, China rises. In the east, Europe fades. What will it take to turn this vessel before the wind and plot a course for peace and prosperity? Okay, enough with the sailing metaphors. I can't tell a mainsail from a jib, but I do know how to read a chart. There's something powerful about the visual representation of data. It reaches our instinctive ability to assess by sight versus the intellectual exercise of reading and listening to words and data. For years now, I've been talking to people on my podcasts, in business, and at NYU, where I teach about the state of America and where we're headed. Over and over, I find that data clarifies those conversations, helps me see things clear. So when I decided to collect my views on this essential question of America's sputtering progress, it seemed natural to do it with charts front and center. What the data tells me is not complicated. America is a work in progress, but it's made the most progress toward its ideals. It's become the most like itself when it has invested in a strong middle class. That's my grand economic theory. What makes me so sure about this? The data, and the story that data tells. That story begins nearly 80 years ago, in the summer of 1945. The most destructive event in humanity's long history of violence came to an end. Nazi Germany collapsed in April, and in August, after the U.S. dropped 2 atomic bombs, Imperial Japan surrendered. Nations devastated by battle would take a generation to rebuild. The U.S. faced a different problem. Though American soil saw little combat, the war transformed the U.S. economy. The automobile industry retooled to build tanks and planes. Shipping and internal transportation were reconfigured to support armament production and transport. Rations limited the consumption of goods ranging from gasoline to soap. In 1945, 40% of the nation's GDP was directed to the war effort. Today, we spend 3.7% of our GDP on the military. The U.S., in a deep depression before the war, had been reanimated into a purpose-built economy, Roosevelt's arsenal of democracy. With the arrival of peace, that purpose dissipated. The economy lost the customer responsible for almost half its business. Tank factories and shipping depots closed. Over the following 24 months, the U.S. military shed 10 million service members. 10 million people, mostly young men, needed jobs, homes, cars, and prospects. When the ticker tape parades finished, wages began to fall and rents began to rise. Workers in every major industry went on strike, and a nationalist movement began bubbling up from the simmering belief that we'd overinvested abroad at the expense of domestic needs. Planners feared that the economy would return to the pre-war depression or worse. Except that's not what happened. Instead, the arsenal of democracy transformed into the engine of capitalism. The next 30 years brought record low unemployment, sustained economic growth, and widespread investment in infrastructure and R&D. The leap forward in the human condition was breathtaking, and not just in the U.S. Infant mortality and poverty plummeted worldwide, and life expectancy and literacy skyrocketed. A global effort, largely funded and led by the U.S., eradicated smallpox. The disease that had killed 90% of indigenous Americans became the first to be eradicated by human intent. In 1969, 3 brave astronauts traveled 240,000 miles. Note, approximately 3,600 times farther than Blue Origin's New Shepard. And an American set foot on Earth's only natural satellite.